Let's see. Yeah, I think it's time. Can you guys hear me? Great, great. So we're going to pick up. We're going to pick up from where we left last time, and let's recall where we were. We're talking about a one-period binomial model. So the one-period binomial model. In one-period binomial model. So the input is this random variable psi. So we are imagining, and we can either go up or go down, and we are thinking about flipping a coin. So we will have that if the coin comes up with heads, I'm going to go up. And if the coin flip comes out tails, I'm going to go down. And the assumption we're going to make, so our assumption is going to be, that the probability that psi is u, and this is going to be something between 0 and 1, strictly. Okay, so there is a chance of getting a heads, and there is a chance of getting a tails. But exactly what this number here is, we're not going to care about. Okay, so then we're going to model the stock. We have a one period, so that'll be 2 time points. So we're going to have the initial one, and we're going to have the end, the terminal one. And we're going to start out here with S0. So the 0 downstairs is the one that corresponds to the time point. And so over here we're going to have S1. So S1, if we get a heads in our coin flip, this is going to be whatever it was to begin with, times that u. So you can go from here, you can go up, and you can go down. So here we have S1 tails, it's going to be S0 times d. We're working here in a world where u is bigger than d. Okay, so that's the stock. This is the one period binomial model for the stock. The other one we want to have is the bank. And the bank looks very similar. It's again, S denotes its price. So there'll be the bank price at time 0. And to indicate, we need to have a difference between the two. So I'm going to put a 0 up here. So this is where it's going to start out. This is going to be at time 0. And then at the end, at the end, there's going to be a difference between the stock and the bank, and the big difference is going to be that the stock can take two values, and the bank, well, the bank can only take one. So the bank is going to go from what it was to whatever it was to times 1 plus r. So these are input. So the input parameters are, the inputs will be u, d, and r. Okay, so this is the binomial model, the one-period binomial model, which we talked about last time. So let me pause here and see, are there any questions on what's on the sheet here? Or are we all good so far? So then, now we have a model, so we're going to use the model to solve a problem. And so our first application, and this is also going to be the main application, is the derivative pricing. Okay, so talk a little bit about derivatives. In this course here, what is a derivative? Well, a derivative is something that pays out depending on, it's a derivative that has a payoff, and the payoff depends upon what the underlying stock price is. So the derivative will pay out something if it's heads, and it'll pay out something else if it's tails. Okay, so to get a derivative, so for a function, let's say it goes from R to R, for a function, we are interested in the time zero price of the time one payoff f of S1. Right, so on a picture, so we'll look at the same, try to make the same picture as what we had here. The stock price has two possible values, okay? So depending on whether you go up or you go down, you're going to get two possible values of the payoff of the derivative. So the derivative's payoff is going to be f of S1 in the upstate. That was S0 times U. Right, so you go up, you go down, f of S0 times D. Right, so here we have time 0, and here we have time 1. And so what we're interested in now is to complete the tree. And completing the tree means we need to figure out what we put out here in the beginning. We know what we're putting out here at the end. F is a given function. So we need to figure out what do we want to put here. And that's what derivative pricing is. So our goal is to find this question mark. How much money are you willing to pay at time 0 for getting the payoff f of S1? So that means you're going to get f of S0 times U in the upstate. You're going to get f of S0 times D in the downstate. Okay. If there are questions as we move along, just can either write in the chat or you can speak up. What we looked at last time was typical examples of this function f. This would be like the forward. K is a number. It could be the put. So we take positive part. It could be the call. So we swap x and k. These are the ones that we're interested in. And you can see, maybe it's not obvious, but if I look at the three pictures, so if I look at the forward has k minus x, so if k is up here, then x is equal to 0, you get k, so it's a straight line that moves down. It looks like this. So it cuts right here. If I look at the put, we had these pictures last time too. If you look at a put, then when x is equal to 0, you get k. Presumably k is positive, so you're going to get k. And then it's going to decay linearly down to 0. And then when x is bigger than k, you're going to get something negative in here. Take positive part, you're going to get a 0. So it's going to look like that. And then I'll look at the call. And the call, well, when x is equal to 0, I get minus k, positive part, I'm going to get a 0. So when do I start getting something? This is when x is equal to k. I have k here, and then it'll go linearly. So you can see from this picture that there's a relationship between them. For example, if I want to get this picture over here, the forward. I want to get this picture over here, the forward, and I have these two here. I can get a forward by mixing a put and a call. How do I create the picture on the left from the two pictures on the right? Well, how would we do that? Reflect the call. Yeah, exactly. You reflect the call. You move this thing down. So if I look at a minus call, that will go down here. There's a minus the call, right? So take a put and minus a call. So this is just a node. And this here has a fancy name. It's called the put call parity. If I take the forward, this is equal to put minus call. So if you comprise two, so if you comprise 2, you get the third by combining. Say that you know how to compute the put price, say you know how to compute the call price, and you take the difference and get it forward. This way of combining diagrams it used to be that this was a question that interviewers would use for screening. And so you would give old interview questions like the following I have seen students be given. So old interview questions would do you couldn't do something like this. Here's a picture. What would it be? What could we take? Something like this. No. So here, this would be easy. Old interview. So when you go out and interview for a position, you would be given a diagram like this one. Like, so how would you get that from? How would you get that from pictures like this one? These ones. Put pros call. That's right. And then you move down. You can make them more advanced. Start doing a hat. Maybe you want to have a flat curve, and then you want to have a hat like that. So now it becomes more tricky. How should we do that? And so this here could be a, so try this out. So personally, so you can do this however you want, but personally, I work from right to left. So I start out here and try to figure out what I should use. And then I move left. Okay, so I move in this direction. So how would one create a picture like this using puts and calls, right? Try this out, see if you can get it to work, and then maybe we can talk about it later. All this here is doing is it's giving you an idea that by finding prices of certain derivatives, you can combine them, and then that will give you prices of yet other derivatives. Okay. We want to go back to the fundamental question of derivative pricing. Our goal is to find this question mark here. And let's start out by doing that in an example. This was the example we ended up with last time. So we had a model where this would be the stop. So we have U would be 2, D would be half, and we have the money market account. We'll take you from 1 to 1.25. So R would be 25%. Okay, and so what we're interested in is looking at, I think it was a call we're interested in. So a call with strike 5. How to say call with strike 5 look like? Well, a call, remember the payoff would be X minus K. Okay, so we start out with 8 and minus the strike, which would be 5, and positive part. This would give me 3. And then in the bottom state, well, now we add 2 minus the strike. So this would be minus 3, positive part. So that will give me a 0, okay? So now I'm looking at a call with this payoff, and I want to figure out what should I put here. What is the initial price? How much are we willing to pay for the payoff 3 and 0? And So that's a good question. It's not too far away from what we just did. How do we combine? How did we realize that we could combine the put and the call to get the forward? Well, what we did was either looking at pictures or we did linear algebra. So this here is going to give us a connection with linear algebra. What we're going to do is we're going to use replication. One of you asked me in an email, it seems like that there are different symbols have the same meaning, and this is correct. The concepts are the ones that are unique, and not the words and not the symbols. So lots of things have quite different names. And for example, replication has a different name, and the other name is called hedging. There are probably even other words to describe what we're about to see here. So different things have different meaning. Should we say that? Should say the same thing can have different names, but it does not have a different meaning. Right? So replication and hedging, it means the same thing. And what it means is that we should buy or sell units of the bank. We should sell units of the stock to synthetically create the payoff of the call. So we're going to invest in these two. We're going to buy something of this one. We're going to buy, sell something of this one. We're going to buy, sell something of this one, and then we're going to create the structure we have now. Okay, so how does one do that? And this is why it's going to look a lot like linear algebra. Just take a seat. This is why it's going to look a lot like linear algebra. So we're going to be saying, well, what is it that I want? So delta 0, that's going to be however many units I have of the bank. And the bank is going to have the value 1.25 at the end. Okay, plus, and then I'm going to have delta of S. So delta times S. Okay, this is what I want to be. This is my goal. I want this to become my function, which was S1 minus, and then the slide was 5, positive 1. My goal is to find these two such that that's true. So this is the same, because there are two values of S1. This is going to be the same as delta 0 times 1.25 plus delta times, and then what was the up value of the stock? The up value was 8. So this is going to be the same. This is going to be the same. So S1 in the up, 8. Then what was the payoff of the call in the up state? That was 3. Okay, and then we replicate the equation here downstairs. So this is delta 0 times 1.25 plus delta. Now what was the stock in the downstairs? S1 in the downstairs was, instead of 8, it's going to be 2. And what about the call? Well, instead of 3, it's going to be 0. So those are my replicating equations. And this is why it's linear algebra, because I have two linear equations in two unknowns. I have two linear equations in two unknowns. Are we good so far? So we have two equations and two unknowns. How many solutions do I get? Well, if I have linear equations, and here you have two linear equations and two unknowns. So I can either have one solution, so either one solution, zero solutions, or can I have two? Infinitely many. So there are three possibilities. Either there's no solution to this stuff, there's one solution, or they're infinitely many. Here, there is exactly one solution. So I'm not going to be, I trust that we all know how to solve two equations and two unknowns. This I trust we can do. So we solve, we're going to get delta 0 is equal to, what did I get? Minus 4 divided by 5. And delta was half. There's a note here. These are fractions. And fractions are okay. And negative positions, they're also okay. We're not putting restrictions on that we can only own one stock, we can only own two stocks, and so on. We are allowed to own half a stock, and we're also allowed to have negative positions. So here we have a negative position in the bank, we have a positive position in the stock. So this is often called a short position. This is called short. So you short the bank, and we are long the stock. But you're also allowed to be short the stock and long the bank. Okay, so now I know what do I need to do. I need to buy half a stock, and I need to sell 4 divided by 5 of the bank. If I do that, I'm going to get exactly this payoff down here. Yes, that's right. Sell means take a loan. That's right. You short the bank. Means you borrowed money. You can also borrow a stock. That's also okay. So now I have my replicating portfolio. This is called the replicating portfolio, or the hedge. So what is the price? So price at time 0. What is the price of this thing? Well, I need to buy half a stock. Okay, so I have half a stock. What's the value of the stock? Well, the value of the stock is 4. Okay, so if I want to buy half a stock, I need to come up with $2. And then in the bank, I'm doing the opposite. It's 4 over 5 with a negative sign times what's the value of the bank account? That's $1. So that's my number. And if I work out what this is, I get 1.2. I get 1.2. Okay, so I know that the value of the replicating portfolio at time 0 is 1.2. Should that also then be the question mark? Is this how we want to figure out what the question mark is? So this is our basic question. Should the time 0 price of the call be 1.2? See, there are some chat messages. Do you have to take into account the probability of going up and down? Well, so far we have not. How did I get 1.2 again? Let's see. Right, so I had my two equations. I solved them. I got these two numbers down here. Right. And so given these two numbers, I just figure out if I am to buy half a stock and I am to buy minus 4/5 units of the bank, how much is that going to cost me? And I get 1.2. Well, what does the delta mean? This is what we have over here. This is where you see the delta. We're going to buy or sell units of the money market account. We're going to buy or sell units of the stock, and those units we're going to denote by delta and delta naught. Okay. So there's a question that says that in the book, 1.2 is called the arbitrage free price. Okay, so the book apparently wants to. The book says that this is the price. Okay, I got that. Well, what do you guys think? Should we call this the price, or could it be something else? If you look at the diagram, like if you look at the picture, like could I put 5 out here? Would that be a good number? Would anybody pay $5 for this pay of 3 and 0? No way, right? 5 is way too much, because instead of putting $5 into this, I would rather put $5 into this one, and 5 would grow to 5 times 1.25, which is a lot better than 3 and 0. So we probably want to have a number at least between 0 and 3. Okay, I got that one. And the number that's on the table is 1.2. What would happen if the call was not 1.2? So what if the call trades at say 2? What would you guys do? So we want to sell the call. Great idea. So here's our strategy. What are we going to do? We're going to sell the call. We're going to sell the call, and then we're going to buy. What are we going to buy? We're going to buy probably what works so hard to create. Here we're going to buy the replicating portfolio. This is our strategy. We are going to sell the call, and we're going to buy the replicating portfolio. Okay, so now when we're sitting here at time 0, if we sell the call, we're going to get $2. And then we're going to buy the replicating portfolio. The replicating portfolio costs 1.2, so we have to pony that up. So net, we're going to get 80 cents. This was at time 0. So now what happens when we move forward? Well, when we move forward to time 1, what's going to happen? What's going to happen with our position? We sold the call, so we got money today, so that means we're going to pay in the future. So in the future, we're going to be paying 3 or 0. We're going to be paying 3 or 0, right? So we're going to have minus, and then we're going to be paying either 3 or 0. Depending on whether we go up or we go down. We also bought the replicating portfolio. So what's the replicating portfolio going to do? Well, it's going to have exactly the same payoff. And this was, after all, how we created it. So here we're going to get a plus, either 3 or 0. So when I net them out, I'm going to get 0. So if the call trades at $2, I have a strategy that allows me to get 80 cents today, and in the future, nothing. And in the future, nothing happens. Does that sound like a good deal?
Well, don't we have the 0.8 still?
Can you say that again?
Don't we have the 0.8 left over still at time 0? Can we invest that into the bank?
Yeah. I mean, sure. You can push this 0.8 into the future. If you want to do that, that's okay too. Then you will get in the future you will then have 0.8 times 1.25, and then you will have nothing today, and then you will have something in the future. So you can move this profit here. You can move it to time 1 if you want. So Alice says this is a good deal. A good deal in quantitative finance is called arbitrage. This is one type of arbitrage. So here you have upfront profit with no future risk. So you get cash today, and you don't have to worry about what happens in the future. That's an arbitrage opportunity. And so what happens if we just picked a random number here too? We could have picked another number. We could have picked 1.5. Well, if you pick 1.5, what would we do? Similar setup, but instead of minus 1.2 here, we would have minus 1.5. So we have a smaller number here, but it will still be the same in the future. Thank you, no future risk. There was a no missing in there. With no future risk. Thank you. You will see this happen quite a bit in these lectures. So when I'm writing something that is inconsistent with what I'm saying, just pointed out, so thank you. We could also ask what happens instead of 1.2, it drops down to say 0.5. Well, now the call is undervalued. And so we have to switch the signs. Instead of selling, we'll have to buy the call. Instead of buying the replicating portfolio, we'll be selling the replicating portfolio. And then there'll be no future risk, and we would make money today. The only value that is left where I cannot do this is when that minus 1.2 is exactly the same as what I would have to put up here. So the no arbitrage price, the unique and no arb price is 1.2. Let me type one of these polls and see how we're doing on this one. Oh. These polls are not enabled here. This is not working. Okay, so my poll today is not working. It worked so well last time. Okay. Can you go over the no risk part again? Yes, I can. The no risk part is when I'm dealing with the call, so the no risk part, right? So the future is n equal to 1, right? And there are two possibilities. Either psi is up or psi is down. Right, so no risk means regardless of size value, no risk means that regardless of size value, we don't lose money at this point in time. So to contrast it with, so this doesn't work here. If I took, it doesn't work in this example. So let me do a little example here. If I combine these two pictures into one, right, then you have to have the same starting point. Okay, so I need to put 4 here. This here is the same thing. There's no difference between this picture and then having 4 go up to 4.125, which conveniently is 5. Right, so there's no difference between starting at 1 and going up to 1.25 or starting at 4 and going up to 5. And I can combine these two now. And that's what I'm going to do on this picture. In this example here, I could combine them. So this will be my stock. And then in here, so this will be the stock. And then I would have the bank sit here. This would be the bank. And they all start out at 4. Right, so here there will be, what could I try to do? I could try to buy the stock, and I could sell the bank. So this here is just sell 1 unit, sell 1 unit. I could try to play this game that we just played, but now instead of playing with the replicating portfolio and playing with the call, what I want to play with is buying a stock and selling the bank. Okay, so I'm saying here this doesn't work in this example here. Well, why not? Because at time 0, what happens? Well, I buy the stock, okay, so I have the pony up $4, and then I sell the bank. Well, that's going to give me 4. Okay, so far the picture is very similar. The picture is very similar as to what we had before, but now when I look at it at time 1, then what can happen? I bought the stock. Okay, so the stock is going to pay out either 8 or 2. And the bank is going to pay out 5. Right, so the net effect, what is the net effect? The net effect is 8 minus 5, so that'll be 3, or 2 minus 5, which will be minus 3. So you see, even though there's no risk at time 0, in the future, I can either win or I can lose. So this year, this is not an arbitrage. I put nothing at risk, but also there's a chance I'm going to win and there's a chance I'm going to lose. That's just a bet. That's not an arbitrage. This strategy here has risk in it. There is a risk of loss. There's this risk of losing 3. Then there was another question that says that if it's 1.5 in the example here, if it's 1.5, well, then the net would go down to 0.5. And then in the future, you'll still have no future obligations. So you'll make 50 cents and then no future obligations. So you will still, this will still be an arbitrage. And of course, if you can do this here, so this is again, we're selling 1 call and we're selling 1 replicating portfolio. So if you can make 50 cents, you can scale it, and then you can sell 2 calls and you can buy 2 replicating portfolios. And then instead of making 50 cents, you would make $1. And so forth. And you can keep scaling it, so you can make as much profit as you want. As soon as there's a difference between the 1.2 and the price of the call, as soon as there's a difference, you can scale it up and you can make as much net profit as you want.
Professor, how is it possible that the market price of the call is 2, but then like you can buy it for less? You can buy it for 1.2.
You're not buying the call, right? You're buying the replicating portfolio.
What does that mean?
To buy the replicating portfolio, it means that you buy. It means that you buy. In the example we did the calculation, you buy a minus 4 divided by 5 units of the bank.
Oh, so you're borrowing
you're
80 cents from the bank and then buying half a stock.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
That's what it means to buy the replicating portfolio. Right, and the price of the replicating portfolio is 1.2. And so then the question is, why would that imply that the call price should also be 1.2? Well, because if it's not 1.2, you can make money. And the working assumption that we're going to be working under, the assumption that we're going to be working under is that there's no arbitrage in the model. So in that case, you're going to get, in that case, there's no choice. You have to, the call price has to trade for 1.2. Otherwise, somebody will be able to make an infinite amount of profit.
Professor,
Yes.
does the no arbitrage, does that also imply that expected profits, when you discount them back by the interest rate, are always zero?
We have not talked about expectations here. There's no.
Okay. Well, I'm just wondering whether we can only price the assets relative to one another, or if the interest rate alone tells us how much something should cost. So for example, like if the stock price today was 8, then we could tell that that's overpriced because there's a chance that in the future it'll be less than that, but there's no chance that it'll be more than that.
So this is so the thing about the expectations, I have not said anything about expectations at this point. So there the answer will be I don't see how, because we're not using expectations. Irrespectively of whatever that probability was on one of the first slides, what I'm doing here has nothing to do with it. Now the second question is, what about no arbitrage between the stock and the bond? Like, what should be the connection between U, D, and R? If I'm understanding you correctly, namely this interest rate. Can this interest rate just be whatever it wants to be, or is there a restriction on the interest rate? And so that's a good question. And this was what I was about to say. So let me say that now. What about no arbitrage? So what about no arb in the stock and bank market? Well, we have our model. We have our model, so this is my S0. This was S0 times U, S0 times D. And then I have my, let me already do the scaling that we just did before, and let me put S0 here, and then S0 is going to go up with 1 plus R. When are these two things consistent with no arbitrage? Well, I can combine them so I can see the 3 possibilities. I can combine them into one diagram, and this would be the first one. Let me make it red. That's the first possibility. The second possibility would be a combine the two. And I put the red one somewhere in between. And then the third one would be this one. Okay, so those are the possibilities I can think of. When is there arbitrage? When is there no arbitrage? Yeah, so it has to be between U and D. Yeah, what would happen if I look at the first picture, based upon what we just talked about? If I look at the first picture, so if I look at, so the first picture, the first picture, what would you do? How would you create arbitrage?
Borrow money from the bank.
Okay, so you would borrow, so you would go short, you would sell one bank, and that would give you a times zero. That would give you a zero, the initial price. And then what would you? So you're selling something. You should probably also buy something. What do you want to buy?
Probably the option.
No. We just have a stock here. We just
The stock.
and-
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna buy the stock. So you're gonna buy one stock. That's gonna cost you money, but it's gonna cost you exactly the same thing as what you got from selling the bank. So net will be zero. And now we move into the future and have a look at what kind of risk I'll be then subject to. Well, I sold one bank, so I have to pay. I have to pay something. I'm short, right? So I have to get the money back, and that's going to be the down one, right? So this will be minus S0 times 1 plus R. Okay,
So even if the stock goes down, you still make money
that's
because
the point. That's the point. That's exactly the point. So I bought one stock, so I'm going to get either. You're going to get either what was it? S0U or S0D. And so net, you're going to get something. You're going to get S0 and then it's U minus or V1 plus R or S0 D1. There should be another parenthesis there. Right, and this here is possible. So that sounds like a good deal. It's a bet. I enter the bet. Doesn't cost me anything to enter the bet, and I just sit back, put my feet up on the table, and I just let the money flow in, no matter what happens. There's a little snafu. There's a little issue. What about if I am in this picture here? What about if I have the case, this case, so S0U, S0D, and now I make the assumption that my legs, they coincide down here. So this is also equal to S0 times 1 plus R. Then what? What if this happens?
can you still do it?
Yeah. So what would
Because
the thing that would change would be that in the future, so at time 1, the net is S0 times U minus 1 plus R or 0. So then this is bigger than or equal to 0. Is that still arbitrage? This is still arbitrage. This is still arbitrage because when do I get something? I get something in this case. This is in the up case. is there a real probability of being in the up case? And so this is where we have to go all the way back to one of the first slides we had.
Do they both have to be positive? So the expected value is still positive.
Like this expected value, we're still talking about probabilities. The probabilities are strictly positive. So that was all the way back to the very first thing I wrote. There is a strictly positive probability of going up, therefore, and it's between 0 and 1. So there's a strictly positive probability of both U and D. Right? So there is, because the probability of psi being U is strictly positive, there is a chance to make money with no risk. Because you're always non-negative, you're always bigger than or equal to 0, and there is a chance that you actually end up making money. And there's a question, why is it negative? Well, it's negative because you borrow money in the bank, right? You're short in the bank, right? So you have to pay the loan back. Like it's negative here, and then it's positive over here. It's positive here, and then it's going to be negative over here. So I know there's been discussions now about these expectations. This particular probability here, it's assumed to be strictly positive, but whether it's 0.1, 0.5, or 0.9, we have said nothing about that. We have not said anything about expectations. The only assumption we made is that there's no arbitrage in the model, so it means that you cannot make money without taking on some risk. In the past, it's always been the case that there are some students that want to see the symbols for the math symbols behind there's no arbitrage. So maybe I should write them down. So the formal definition of what an arbitrage is. Right, so we have wealth. So the wealth is denoted by x1. And this is the wealth at time 1. So what that is the position in the bank times the bank. So this was a 0 times 1 plus R. And then plus the position in the stock times the stock price. So this is the wealth at time 1. The wealth at time 0, the wealth at time 0 is going to be the position in the bank times the bank value plus the position in the stock times the stock price. This is wealth at time 1, this is wealth at time 0. Right, so there are two types of arbitrage. This is also just called arm. Right, so type 1. Type 1 says you start out with nothing, and just make sure I didn't switch these around. Yeah, this is what I've been referring to as type 1. So you start out with nothing, and then in the future, x1, you're never going to lose something, so it's non-negative. And there's a possibility that x1 is strictly positive. Right, so you start out with nothing, you run to the end of the period, you don't owe anything, and there's a chance that you're going to end up with something strictly positive. And the type 2 is you get money today, and you don't owe anything in the future. Right, so you buy it, it's going to give you money now, and then in the future, you don't owe anything. So now is the time where I wish I had my little poll set up. I'll make sure I have that set up next time. Are there any questions or comments here? I don't even know how far along we are. I have a little bit more time. Are there questions or comments? Let me switch up to. Are there questions or comments so far? See. Richard is asking, what's the symbol name? The symbol. Which symbol are we talking about? Let me switch back to. The triangles. Oh, deltas. These ones. These are called deltas. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I mean the wealth symbol. The wealth symbol.
X.
Oh, that's an X.
Oh, yeah. So you see, this is yeah, excellent. So yeah, so this is how probability is written. So you see this P here. So note, this is my notation. So this here, this is a little x. This is a little x. This one here, this is a big X. This is a capital. This P here, this is bold P. You will see many weird symbols coming out as I write. Right, so we had this one here, this was the psi. You will also see letters like this one coming out. This is a, I don't even know what it's called, like a math cal, F. So when you see stuff like this, just put it in the symbol, put it in the log. Yeah, the triangles is a capital X. Yeah, the second type of arbitrage. Yes, you can. The second type of arbitrage is you get money now, and you don't have any risk later. So we had one of those. Let's go back to that example. Right. That was this example we had. This here is the second type. This is type 2. We get money now, and we don't have any risk later. Right. X0, this is the price. Right. So I'm going to buy it. I buy something that has a price of minus $5. I'm going to get $5. Right. So I get $5 here, and I don't owe anything later.
Why is it less than 0 and not?
Because if it was positive, then I buy it. Okay, so then I put $5 in. Then I would also. There's no contradiction with paying positive money for getting positive future payoffs. Like this is exactly what we do with a bank and with a stock, right? We pay $1, and then later on we'll get the payoff. So there are two types of arbitrage. So if you're not happy with, one of you suggested that we could just push this payoff here into the future. So if we don't like type 1, we can just move this one here into the future. Like in that case, we could move this thing, we write that in red. I could move this thing into the future. And then in the future, I would have a net here of 0. And then in the future, I would have a net of 0.8 times 1.25. Right, so then we would be in the first case. There would be in the first case that I would have a 0, and then put it into the future, and I would have whatever this number comes out to be, maybe 1, something around 1. So if number 2 is not, we're not happy with, we just stick to number 1 and move this payment into the future. Yeah, so maybe we should, so let's not talk about this one here. This seems to be causing too much confusion. So we'll just have this one here. We start out with nothing, and then later on we're going to get money, and we're never going to owe anything. The confusion here is that I see in the confusion that I'm seeing here, this is all just a convention about what the sign should be. So to avoid that, let's just say you start out with nothing, and then later on you won't have any obligations, and you can do that here. Like 80 cents today in this model is the same thing as having 0.8 times 1.25 in the future. So then we don't have to worry about this type 2. So we have 10 minutes left, and one thing you will see me do a lot in class is step back and then try to ask, so what is it that makes this stuff here work? And so we've been doing this replicating argument now for 2 lectures, and so what is it that what was the fundamental thing? What is the fundamental thing that makes this thing tick? What is it that makes this thing work? So what do I need to change to make this thing fall apart? So what's the fundamental structure that makes this argument here work? So how do I make it break? So how do I break the theory? How do I break the theory? Well, what do we have? We have 2 time points, and we have 1 period, and then we have 2 possibilities. Okay, so why don't we try to do a what should we call it? Trinomial model. Why don't we try to build a trinomial model? So now we'll have that psi takes values, so it'll be up, mid, and down. And then I'll look at a picture. So this is my S0. And this is my S0 U, S0 mid, and S0 down. And so to get no arbitrage, I need to put my interest rate somewhere in between. Okay, so let's say that the interest rate sits here. S0 times 1 plus R. What happens if I do this? What changes in my previous analysis? More outcomes. That's right. There are 3 possibilities. So I will get, before I had, where did my replicating equations go? Before I had 2 linear equations in 2 unknowns. What will I have now? Well, how many equations did I get? I got 1 equation for each possible value of psi. This here is for each value of psi. Gives 1 equation. 2 unknowns, this is the number of traded securities. So here is the bank and the stock. So what will I get now? Well, now I have 3 values of psi. So I'm going to get 3 linear equations in how many unknowns? Well, I'm still only going to have a bank and a stock. There are only 2 unknowns. Okay, so such a system, how many solutions does it have? Will it have 0, 1, or plus infinity many solutions? What's the most likely that we're thinking about here? Is it most likely that 3 equations in 2 unknowns will have 0, 1, or infinitely many solutions? Maybe make it simpler. What about if I had 2 equations in 1 unknown? Would you think that it would be likely for me to be able to solve them, or would it be unlikely for me to be able to solve them? 0 solutions. This here is the likely case. Okay, so then I can't solve it. That means that there is, so in which case a replication is not possible. This here is called model incompleteness. So model incompleteness, this is related to us not being able to solve these equations because we do not have enough unknowns. So for this to work, I need more unknowns. Okay, how do I get more unknowns? Well, I need to have more traded securities, right? Because the unknowns are the positions that I have in those traded securities. So I need to have, in addition to the bank, the red line, and in addition to the stock, the blue lines, I need to have another security. So I need to have, for example, another stock. And then I would increase the number of unknowns from 2 to 3, and I'll have 3 linear equations and 3 unknowns. And then I might be able to move the likely scenario to be exactly 1 solution as I had before. This year is going to come in a homework. This is going to come in a later homework. I can see there are a few more questions. There's a question about how soon the lecture is posted. That depends. posting these lectures last time was a problem because Canvas doesn't allow. So what's going on is using a document camera like I'm using here, this creates very large file sizes, and the file sizes are bigger than what Canvas allows me to upload. So I switched over and I started uploading them on YouTube. So you'll see links there to YouTube videos. So YouTube has a bigger limit, and so I'm at the mercy of YouTube. I don't know how fast it will process the videos. That depends. The videos that I'm uploading are about 800 megabytes, and it can take quite a while for YouTube to process them. So honestly, I don't know. I can tell you that I'm going to start the process when we're done with the lecture, but when it will be available on YouTube, this I don't know. Then there's a question about interest rate for borrowing is the same as for lending. Yeah, there's only one interest rate. So we're not charging a different interest rate for deposits versus for taking money out. We do not have these restrictions. At this level of generality in the model, we don't have that model feature. These so I had written that somewhere. These deltas that we had, they are allowed to be fractions. They can be positive or negative. It's not like that the position in the bank has to be positive to have that interest rate. That's not the case, and we do not have two different of these lines. We would need something like that if we were to start putting restrictions on what delta zero could be. Then there could be one interest rate when delta is positive, and there could be another interest rate when delta is negative. Right? So you pay a higher interest rate on loans than you would pay on deposits. We don't have that in this one period of model. And there's a question about an overdetermined system. I'm always confusing myself whether one is overdetermined or underdetermined. So there are too many equations for the number of unknowns here, right? So while it is possible that sometimes you could be lucky and solve 3 equations and 2 unknowns. In general, this is not going to be possible. So that system is ill-posed. It doesn't have a unique solution. Whereas the system we looked at in the traditional binomial model, we won't have that problem. There's a unique solution. And so I use this word here at the very end. I use this word called model incompleteness. So the traditional one-period binomial model, it is an example of a model that is complete. So the binomial model is complete. Binomial models, they are called complete. What's called complete? We'll talk a lot about this. And then there's a question at the end about the homeworks. Well, the homeworks are a little bit different here in the beginning. The homework problems, we are disconnected from the theory. Like the first homework is a questions about like analysis. Like, can you write down Riemann integrals and can you work with Riemann integrals? And that's because I have seen in the past that some students, they need a little refresher on how to take derivatives of integrals and so on. So yeah, you're supposed to be able to solve these homework problems, and if you're not, then come to my office hours and I should also say that I posted additional office hours. I had some this morning, and then there will be some again tomorrow morning. The ones on Friday mornings are combined with a related class. So if you have questions, it is a lot easier to answer your questions face to face, whereas trying to answer questions over emails that are related to math, this is basically impossible. just creates even more confusion. So I'm quite reluctant to have a math discussion over email. It simply just doesn't work very well. Okay. Otherwise, it's 8 o'clock. Time to get some dinner, at least for me. And then on Tuesday there's a scheduling thing. I think Tuesday's lectures are replaced by Monday's lectures, which means that we will not see each other Tuesday night. Okay. Otherwise, have a good night, guys, and I'll see you either tomorrow morning or next week. Thank you.